I remember going back and having a look at Treaty Dynamic. What an awesome name, and also looking up dynamic, what did that mean, in the English dictionary. And dynamic as an organisation that was fresh, that was changeable, that was adaptable. And as people being dynamic, the people were fresh and people were courageous. And so there were great possibilities within the name.
The board, I think, came together as quite a new group of people at the beginning of 2019, and I think there was quite a lot of health experience in the room. Some of us have been working in health for 35, 40 years, and I think we could all put our hands on our heart and say that really for Māori and Pacific Island particularly, and other vulnerable people, the dial had not been shifted at all, and we had that overriding stat, if you like, that Māori were dying 10 years younger than non-Māori. And to me, for all of us, that just was wrong and not equitable at all. And so we thought we need to do something different.
I started thinking and reflecting around treaty and how do I put that into practice? Because often it's treaty and government's often about risk management, it's often about prescribing boxes, and I wanted us to think about shifting that mindset, ability to test, explore, create, and so that creative thinking to apply the treaty in practice takes us to a different way and actually freedom to fail. So we don't want to prescribe or manage risk. We want to look at the treaty as an opportunity. I started using the language treaty-centric, and then we had a meeting with Tangata Whenua Advisory Group, and I started using this language around let's be treaty-centric and let's apply the articles and practice in a way that works, because everyone's got different levels of ability to respond to the treaty. And one of our members, Hini Moike Murray from Ngāti Porou, she challenged the notion of treaty-centric, saying it was assimilatory in nature and that it would be caught up in machinery of government. And she said, I like the notion of treaty dynamic because that implies a way of operating that's, again, dynamic and evolutionary in nature and not fixed in terms of a set way of operating.
Part of Te Tiriti Dynamic is applying the principles, tino rangatiratanga partnerships, active protection, options and equity. And it's about having Māori leadership as part of applying or upholding Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
They're pretty straightforward concepts, but what treaty dynamism does is it allows us to think about how we execute that in different ways, and often that's about sharing power and control, and that is about relationships and building trusted relationships. So you don't have to have a described endpoint, it's actually a way of operating that delivers against sort of outcomes, but not going to the endpoint straight away.
It's about supporting and getting behind and enabling that tino rangatiratanga, in a sense, of local Māori to decide for themselves what haura and well-being is, and then our role may be to support them.
I think the 80s medical orientated health system was very much a hierarchical one, whereas if you work in a true Te Tiriti way, it's about partnerships and trust and handing over the power. And so to me that was the big learn for me, and I guess over 40 years maybe I've got it.
When you start reflecting on your obligations under the treaty and being treaty dynamic, you have to accept that as a non-Māori that I have done research with all the best intentions that is likely to have harmed Māori communities because we did not consider our obligations fully. And the way we presented analysis could have perpetuated stereotypes and identified the wrong ways forward. Because we didn't engage with Māori communities in doing the research. It was research done to Māori, or Māori were just part of the overall analysis, but again, we didn't engage or consult in that process. So it's fundamental change to how we do it now.
I see that whether you're a manager, whether you're a data analyst, whether you're the CEO, each of us have that opportunity to uphold Te Tiriti o Waitangi within our mahi. That might be in the funding decisions you make, equitable procurement, which is one of the principles of our Te Herenga Hauora Te Tiriti dynamic approach. And so it's good to have guiding principles, but it's also important for the kaimahi to be able to reflect on what they can do within their own respective roles as well.
You know, the dynamic nature of it is to give it a go, to get on board, test and try things. You might not get it right, but let's learn from that, let's reflect, and let's keep going. So it is dynamic and invigorating.
What I've found is that there's staff that absolutely get it and they're racing down to deliver in a way that works for them. And then I've got staff that struggle with that because it's outside their own way of thinking and their own boxes. So for me, the important thing was to actually allow those early adopters, if that's the right term, to try and deliver the practice, but make sure that we share and we learn and we grow. So the notion of sharing that, but being deliberate in sharing that so that others can see and experience and then move on the journey and operate in a way that is truly dynamic.
It's been really hard for me personally. It's been very hard for members of my team. It's been hard for both Māori and non-Māori staff for different reasons. And there has been some conflict and need to come together again. And that's what we've done, and we've tried to learn as we go. Yes, it's not an easy journey for anybody because fundamentally the Crown hasn't been delivering.
The health system would be at Kohanga Reo, it would be at Kura Kaupapa, it would be at your marae, it would be at your kura. It is truly integrated in local communities. Communities are coming up with the decisions about health and other aspects like housing and income and education. And that is a thriving local community where they have that mana to decide what health looks like for them.
It's a gift, it's a koha for the system, and that gift allows people to translate in a way that works for them. And there is a beauty in allowing people to, again, test, experiment, trial, treaty and practice in ways that work for them. The challenging side for me personally will be if that way of translating is brought back to traditional government ways of operating and very much driven around objectives and closed mindset thinking, because that restricts that evolutionary nature of the term.
I'd like to see people use that through the whole government sector, and the reason being is that it helps people to have exciting conversations around the difficulties. We know in history people are too frightened to ask questions because they might get shut down, but if we can develop a culture where people can ask the questions to look at dynamic ways of building relationships and understanding and implementing solutions, that would be great. Our treaty is an important document. So just in itself being a dynamic document, how do we help that to thrive and flourish? The mind boggles of the potential, you know. It'd be that everyone will be talking about it and everyone will be asking those searching questions and trying to find out a better way to do things, because I think the treaty is organic and we have to be adaptable and see what works all the time. Don't not be satisfied with what we've got, but always looking for what we can become. You know? I think that's where treaty dynamic is.